Charlie, I went crazy. Mario got me. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm not sure what exactly I have in me tonight. Hey, a bunch of messages from before I started. Flora Cat, formerly Country Mama. I hope you're doing better. Hey, Martin, if you come back to see this later, I don't know who's still here. And a Brave New Normal wrote, running to get pizza, but I'll be back to watch as soon as I'm home. I've been shuffling through podcasts, feeling so odd, wanting to not feel lonely, and none were working. I'm so excited you're live. Oh, you still here? Been feeling lonely. I don't know how much I have to say. Um, Fuck, it feels weird doing this at all. It feels very surreal that all of you out there know who I am and care how I'm doing. I guess I feel very detached from the former versions of myself that have been active on here. No, looking back on the past year, right, I called this the year that ate my brain. Hey, Dan, 2 more V's. Yeah, God bless you too, 2 more V's. Thanks for that. Dan says, I'm certainly grateful to see you here, brother. All right, good. Then there was some reason to show up. It was difficult to get myself to go live. I didn't know what the point was. But I guess there's some of you who get something out of me showing up, whether I have anything to say or not. And I'm so fucking stupid right now that I don't really understand that. But I'll stick around a bit and we'll see what happens. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Brave New Normal. 2 more V's music is fucking excellent. And he just dropped his Peterson album recently. So anyone who isn't subscribed to 2 more V's, subscribe to his channel. And I think the whole Peterson album's up now, right? Fuck, see, so stupid. I'm blanking on what it's called. I knew. I know. I don't know. Write it in the fucking chat. Um, It's been over 2 years now that have been rough for me. There's been thing after thing that's broken me down, but 2021 really fucking just about finished me off. The interplay between long haul COVID and bipolar is not pleasant. And then there's seems to be just the right fucking mixture of external problems and stuff as well to have broken me down very completely. Okay, yeah, the album's called Who Dares to Say. And like I know all too well from experience how much worse my brain works in the winter when I'm depressed. I'm very familiar with the normal effects, but I have never been this stupid in my whole life. And it's not just memory difficulties. I can't hold multiple variables in my head. I can't even think large thoughts. I can't understand things that I used to talk about on here. And it's not just mental either. Again, I know what fatigue from depression feels like, but the long haul fatigue effects, fuck, are brutal. I've been working for months trying to get myself to exercise just the tiniest bit, and just the tiniest bit of exercise. Like, it's normal to have trouble doing that when depressed. But still, if I were to, the times I force myself to do it a bit when depressed, especially if I do a very minimal amount, does not, like, you're left tired after. But I can do the smallest amount of exercise and then I'm sore for 2 straight days. And since there's very, very little I can motivate myself to work on, I've been working on meditation, trying to work on my focus by reading. And I've been trying to get myself, like, I've been sticking with exercising a bit every. But even after months of it, it's still just constantly sore in between. And I have no idea if this is ever going to improve or not. If it doesn't, I don't know what use I'm going to be to anybody. Brave New Worlds, I rewound to the start. Just like hearing you talk about whatever and seeing you live makes me happy. I feel like half the man I used to be, too. Oh, sorry you're so broken down. You want to share with us? Sorry, Brave New Normal. You want to share with us what's going on with you? And hey, Flora Cat. It's good to see you're here. You doing better? You were in rough shape before last time I was live, right? Dealing with a friend's suicide? Yeah, I'm really not sure what to say. Okay. Flora Cat says, yeah, I'm better now. Gonna escape Canada to Mexico in the spring. Never been to Mexico. Why there? Oh, 2 more V's approves. Yeah, I'm not sure what to say. I don't feel like expounding on the difficulties of my current state. Trying to escape freedom from COVID junk laws. I have not been keeping up with what's going on in the world or in Canada. A Brave New Normal says, man, just been out of work so long, doing temp work now. Gonna stack boxes of Coca-Cola. Used to work with children, but vax mandate made me lose my dream career. Shit. Sorry to hear that, man. It seems a lot of people are not doing well at the moment. The kind of nonsense that usually comes up for me to ramble on about isn't really coming up. All right, why don't I just read something? Because I don't have anything to say, but I don't feel like just disappearing immediately since some of you get something out of this regardless. I'm going to read a chapter out of Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. I just finished it yesterday. It's an excellent trilogy. Good to see you here, Jamil. Much love. How you doing? All right, I'm going to read the first chapter out of the second book. Each of the books, Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandria, and That Hideous Strength, all stand well on their own and form an interesting trilogy. I'm going to take the first chapter out of Paralandria, alternately published as Voyage to Venus. Floorcat, do you ever watch comedy or stand-up? It's healing sometimes if I can suspend my cynicism. I like comedy and stand-up less and less. I prefer science fiction and fantasy. Well, glad that you're hanging in there, Jamil. Oh, thanks, Mexican burrito. I'm not doing well, but I could be doing much worse. All right, I'm going to read this chapter to give you guys an idea of what the series is like, and maybe it'll make some of you curious to pick it up. Need to check out the Valis trilogy. Who's that by, Mista? All right, anyway, I'm going to read this. As I left the railway station at Worcester and set out on the 3-mile walk to Ransom's cottage, I reflected that no one on that platform could possibly guess the truth about the man I was going to visit. The flat heath which spread out before me, for the village lies all behind and to the north of the station, looked an ordinary heath. The gloomy 5 o'clock sky was such as you might see on any autumn afternoon. The few houses and clumps of red or yellowish trees were in no way remarkable. Who could imagine that a little farther on in that quiet landscape I should meet and shake by the hand a man who had lived and eaten and drunk in a world 40 million miles distant from London, who had seen this earth from where it looks like a mere point of green fire, and who had spoken face to face with a creature whose life began before our own planet was inhabitable. For Ransom had met other things in Mars besides the Martians. He had met the creatures called the Eldila, and especially the great Eldil, who was the ruler of Mars, or in their speech, the Eorsa of Malacandra. The Eldila are very different from any planetary creatures. Their physical organism, if organism it can be called, is quite unlike either the human or the Martian. They do not eat, breed, breathe, or suffer natural death, and to that extent resemble thinking minerals more than they resemble anything we should recognize as an animal. Though they appear on planets, and may even seem to our senses to sometimes be resident in them, the precise spatial location of an Eldil at any moment presents great problems. They themselves regard space, or deep heaven, as their true habitat, and the planets are to them not closed worlds, but merely moving points, perhaps even interruptions, in what we know as the solar system, and they as the field of Arbel. At present, I was going to see Ransom in answer to a wire which had said, "Come down Thursday if possible, business." I guessed what sort of business he meant, and that was why I kept on telling myself that it would be perfectly delightful to spend a night with Ransom, and also kept on feeling that I was not enjoying the prospect as much as I ought to. It was the Eldila that were my trouble. I could just get used to the fact that Ransom had been to Mars. But to have met an Eldil, to have spoken with something whose life appeared to be practically unending, even the journey to Mars was bad enough. A man who has been to another world does not come back unchanged. One can't put the difference into words. When the man is a friend, it may become painful. The old footing is not easy to recover. But much worse was my growing conviction that since his return, the Eldila were not leaving him alone. Little things in his conversation, little mannerisms, accidental allusions, which he made and then drew back with an awkward apology, all suggested that he was keeping strange company, that there were, well, visitors at the cottage. As I plodded along the empty, unfenced road which runs across the middle of Worcester Common, I tried to dispel my growing sense of malaise by analyzing it. What, after all, was I afraid of? The moment I had put this question, I regretted it. I was shocked to find that I had mentally used the word afraid. Up until then, I had tried to pretend that I was feeling only distaste or embarrassment or even boredom. But the mere word afraid had let the cat out of the bag. I realized now that my emotion was neither more nor less nor other than fear. And I realized that I was afraid of two things. Afraid that sooner or later I might meet an Eldil, and afraid that I might get drawn in. I suppose everyone knows this fear of getting drawn in, the moment at which a man realizes that what had seemed merely speculations were on the point of landing him in the Communist Party or the Christian Church. That sense that a door had just slammed and left him on the inside. The thing was sheer bad luck. Ransom himself had been taken to Mars, or Malacandra, against his will and almost by accident, and I had become connected with his affair by another accident. Yet here we were both getting more and more involved in what I could only describe as interplanetary politics. As to my intense wish to never come in contact with the Eldila myself, I am not sure whether I can make you understand it. It was something more than a prudent desire to avoid creatures alien in kind, very powerful and very intelligent. The truth was that all I heard about them served to connect two things, which one's mind tends to keep separate, and that connecting gave a sort of shock. We tend to think about non-human intelligences in two distinct categories, which we label as scientific and supernatural, respectively. We think in one mood of Mr. Wells' Martians, very unlike the real Malacandrians, by the by, or his Selenites. In a different mood, we let our minds loose on the possibility of angels, ghosts, fairies, and the like. But the very moment we are compelled to recognize a creature in either class as real, the distinction begins to get blurred. And when it is a creature like an Eldil, the distinction vanishes altogether. These things were not animals. To that extent, one had to classify them with the second group. But they had some kind of material vehicle whose presence could, in principle, be scientifically verified. To that extent, they belonged to the first group. The distinction between natural and supernatural, in fact, broke down. And when it had done so, one realized how great a comfort it had been, how it had eased the burden of intolerable strangeness which this universe imposes on us by dividing it into two halves and encouraging the mind never to think of both in the same context. What price we may have paid for this comfort in the way of false security and accepted confusion of thought is another matter. This is a long, dreary road, I thought to myself. Thank goodness I haven't anything to carry. And then with a start of realization, I remembered that I ought to be carrying a pack containing my things for the night. I swore to myself, I must have left the thing in the train. Will you believe me when I say that my immediate impulse was to turn back to the station and do something about it? Of course, there was nothing to be done, which could not equally well be done by ringing up from the cottage. That train with my pack in it must be, by this time, miles away. I realize that now as clearly as you do. But at the moment, it seemed perfectly obvious that I must retrace my steps, and I had indeed begun to do so before reason or conscience awoke and set me once more plodding forwards. In doing this, I discovered more clearly than before how very little I wanted to do it. It was such hard work that I felt as if I were walking against a headwind. But in fact, it was one of those still, dead evenings when no twig stirs and beginning to be a little foggy. The farther I went, the more impossible I found it to think about anything except these Adela. What, after all, did Ransom really know about them? By his account, the sorts which he had met did not usually visit our own planet, or had only begun to do so since his return from Mars. We had Adela of our own, he said, Tellurian Adela, but they were of a different kind and mostly hostile to man. That, in fact, was why our world was cut off from the communication with the other planets. He described us as being in a state of siege, as being, in fact, an enemy-occupied territory, held down by Adela who were at war with us and with the Adela of deep heaven or space. Like the bacteria on the microscopic level, so these co-inhabitating pests on the macroscopic permeate our whole life invisibly and are the real explanation of that fatal bent which is the main lesson of history. If all this were true, then, of course, we should welcome the fact that Adela of a better kind had at last broken the frontier. It is, they say, at the moon's orbit, and were beginning to visit us, always assuming that Ransom's account was the correct one. A nasty idea occurred to me. Why should not Ransom be a dupe? If something from outer space were trying to invade our planet, what better smokescreen could it put up than this very story of Ransom's? Was there the slightest evidence, after all, for the existence of the supposed maleficent Eldela on this earth? How if my friend were the unwitting bridge, the Trojan horse, whereby some possible invader were infecting its landing on Tellus? And then once more, just as when I had discovered that I had no pack, the impulse to go no further returned to me. Go back, it whispered to me. Send him a wire, tell him you were ill, say you'll come some other time, anything. The strength of the feeling astonished me. I stood there for a few minutes telling myself not to be a fool. When I finally resumed my walk, I was wondering whether this might be the beginning of a nervous breakdown. No sooner had this idea occurred to me than it also became a new reason for not visiting Ransom. Obviously, I wasn't fit for any such jumpy business, as his telegram almost certainly referred to. I wasn't even fit to spend an ordinary weekend away from home. My only sensible course was to turn back at once and get safe home before I lost my memory or became hysterical, and to put myself in the hands of a doctor. It was sheer madness to go on. It was now coming to the end of the heath. I was now coming to the end of the heath and going down a small hill with a copse on my left and some apparently deserted industrial buildings on my right. At the bottom, the evening mist was partially thick. They call it a breakdown at first, I thought. Wasn't there some mental disease in which quite ordinary objects looked to the patently unbelievably ominous, looked in fact, just as that abandoned factory looks to me now, great bulbous shapes of cement, strange brickwork boogies, glowered at me over dryly scrubbed grass, pockmarked with gray pools, and intersected with the remains of a light railway. I was reminded of things which Ransom had seen in that other world, only there they were people, long spindle-like giants whom he called Sorns. What made it worse was that he regarded them as good people. Very much nicer, in fact, than our own race. Was he in league with them? How did I know he was even a dupe? He might be still something worse. And again, I came to a standstill. The reader, not knowing Ransom, will not understand how contrary to all reason this idea was. The rational part of my mind, even at that moment, knew perfectly well that even if the whole universe were crazy and hostile, Ransom was sane and wholesome and honest. And this part of my mind in the end sent me forward, but with a reluctance and a difficulty I can hardly put into words. What enabled me to go on was the knowledge, deep down inside me, that I was getting nearer at every stride to the one friend. But I felt that I was getting nearer to the one enemy, the traitor, the sorcerer, the man in league with them, walking into a trap with my eyes open like a fool. They call it a breakdown at first, said my mind, and send you to a nursing home. Later on, they move you to an asylum. I was past the dead factory now, down in the fog where it was very cold. Then came a moment, the first one of absolute terror, and I had to bite my lip to keep myself from screaming. It was only a cat that had run across the road, but I found myself completely unnerved. Soon you will really be screaming, said my inner tormentor, running round and round screaming, and you won't be able to stop it. There was a little empty house by the side of the road, with most of the windows boarded up and one staring like the eye of a dead fish. Please understand that at ordinary times the idea of a haunted house means no more to me than it does to you. No more, but also no less. At that moment, it was nothing so definite as the thought of a ghost that came to me. It was just the word haunted. Haunted. Haunting. What a quality there is in that first syllable. Would not a child who had never heard the word before and did not know its meaning shudder at the mere sound of? If, as the day was closing in, it heard one of its elders say to another, "This house is haunted," At last I came to the crossroads by the little Wesleyan chapel, where I had to turn to the left under the beech trees. I ought to be seeing the lights from Ransom's window by now, or was it past blackout time? My watch had stopped and I didn't know. It was dark enough, but that might be due to the fog in the trees. It wasn't the dark I was afraid of, you understand. We have all known times when inanimate objects seem to almost have a facial expression. And it was the expression of this bit of road which I did not like. It's not true, said my mind. The people who are really going mad never think they're going mad. Suppose that real insanity had chosen in this place in which to begin. In that case, of course, the black enmity of those dripping trees, their horrible expectancy, would be a hallucination. But that did not make it any better. To think that the specter you see is an illusion does not rob him of his terrors. It simply adds the further terror of madness itself. And then on top of that, the horrible surmise that those whom the rest of us call mad have all along been the only people who see the world as it really is. This was upon me now. I staggered on into the cold and the darkness, already half convinced that I must be entering what is called madness. By each moment, my opinion about sanity changed. Had it ever been more than a convention, a comfortable set of blinkers, an agreed mode of wishful thinking, which excluded from our view the full strangeness and malevolence of the universe we are compelled to inhabit? The things I had begun to know during the last few months of my acquaintance with Ransom already amounted to more than sanity would admit. But I had come much too far to dismiss them as unreal. I doubted his interpretation or his good faith. I did not doubt the existence of the things he had met in Mars. The Fiffletriggy, the Harassa, the Sorns, nor of these interplanetary Adila. I did not even doubt the reality of that mysterious being whom the Adila called Meladil, and to whom they appear to give total obedience, such as no Tellurian dictator can command. I knew what Ransom supposed Meladil to be. Surely that was the cottage. It was very well blacked out. A childish, whining thought arose in my mind. Why was he not out at the gate to welcome me? An even more childish thought followed. Perhaps he was in the garden waiting for me, hiding. Perhaps he would jump on me from behind. Perhaps I should see a figure that looked like Ransom standing with its back to me, and when I spoke to it, it would turn around and show a face that was not human at all. I have naturally no wish to enlarge on this phase of my story. The state of mind I was in was one which I look back on with some humiliation. I would have passed it over if I did not think that some account of it was necessary for a full understanding of what follows. And perhaps of some other things as well. At all events, I can't really describe how I reached the front door of the cottage. Somehow or other, despite the loathing and dismay that pulled me back, and a sort of invisible wall of resistance that met me in the face, fighting for each step, and almost shrieking as a harmless spray of the hedge touched my face, I managed to get through the gate and up the little path, and there I was, drumming on the door and ringing the handle and shouting to him to let me in as if my life depended on it. There was no reply, not a sound except the echo of the sounds I had been making myself. There was only something white fluttering on the door knocker. I guessed, of course, that it was a note. And striking a match to read it by, I discovered how very shaky my hands had become. When the match went out, I realized how dark the evening had grown. After several attempts, I read the thing. Sorry, had to go up to Cambridge. Shan't be back till the late train. Edibles and larder and bed made up in your usual room. Don't wait supper for me unless you feel like it. ER. And immediately the impulse to retreat, which had already assailed me several times, leapt upon me with a sort of demonic violence. Here was my retreat left open, positively inviting me. Now was my chance. If anyone expected me to go into that house and sit there alone for several hours, they were mistaken. But then as the thought of the return journey began to take shape in my mind, I faltered. The idea of setting out to traverse the avenue of beech trees again, it was really dark now, with this house behind me, one had the absurd feeling that it could follow one, was not attractive. And then I hoped something better came into my mind, some rag of sanity, and some reluctance to let Ransom down. At least I could try the door to see if it were really unlocked. I did, and it was. Next moment, I hardly know how, I found myself inside and let it slam behind me. It was quite dark and warm. I groped a few paces forward, hit my shin violently against something, and fell. I sat still for a few moments, nursing my leg. I thought I knew the layout of Ransom's hall sitting room pretty well, and couldn't imagine what I had blundered into. Presently, I groped in my pocket, got out my matches, and tried to strike a light. The head of the match flew off. I stamped on it and sniffed to make sure it was not smoldering on the carpet. As soon as I sniffed, I became aware of a strange smell in the room. I could not for the life of me make out what it was. It had an unlikeness to ordinary domestic smells, as great as that of some chemicals, but it was not a chemical kind of smell at all. Then I struck another match. It flickered and went out almost at once, not unnaturally, since I was sitting on the doormat, and there are few front doors, even in better built houses than Ransom's country cottage, which do not admit a draft. I had seen nothing by it except the palm of my own hand, hollowed in an attempt to guard the flame. Obviously, I must get away from the door. I rose gingerly and felt my way forward. I came at once to an obstacle, something smooth and very cold that rose a little higher than my knees. As I touched it, I realized that it was the source of the smell. I groped my way along this to the left and finally came to the end of it. It seemed to present several surfaces, and I couldn't picture the shape. It was not a table, for it had no top. One's hands groped along the rim of a kind of low wall, the thumb on the outside and the fingers down inside the enclosed space. If it had felt like wood, I should have supposed it to be a large packing case, but it was not wood. I thought for a moment that it was wet, but soon decided that I was mistaking coldness for moisture. When I reached the end of it, I struck a third match. I saw something white and semi-transparent, rather like ice. A great big thing, very long, a kind of box, an open box, and of a disquieting shape which I did not immediately recognize. It was big enough to put a man into. Then I took a step back, lifting the lighted match higher to get a more comprehensive view, and instantly tripped over something behind me. I found myself sprawled in darkness, not on the carpet, but on more of the cold substance with the odd smell. How many of these infernal things were there? I was just preparing to rise again and hunt systematically around the room for a candle when I heard Ransom's name pronounced, and almost, but not quite, simultaneously, I saw the thing I had feared so long to see. I heard Ransom's name pronounced, but I should not like to say I heard a voice pronounce it. The sound was quite astonishingly unlike a voice. It was perfectly articulate. It was even, I suppose, rather beautiful. But it was, if you understand me, inorganic. We feel the difference between animal voices, including those of the human animal, and all other noises pretty clearly, I fancy, though it's hard to define. Blood and lungs and the warm, moist cavity of the mouth are somehow indicated in every voice. Here they were not. The two syllables sounded more as if they were played on an instrument than if they were spoken, and yet they did not sound mechanical either. A machine is something we make out of natural minerals. This was more as if rock or crystal or light had spoken of itself, and it went through me from the chest to groin, like the thrill that goes through you when you think you've lost your hold while climbing a cliff. That was what I heard. What I saw was simply a very faint rod or pillar of light. I don't think it made a circle of light either on the floor or the ceiling, but I'm not sure of this. It certainly had very little power of illuminating its surroundings. So far, all is plain sailing, but it had two other characteristics which are less easy to grasp. One was its color. Since I saw the thing, I must obviously have seen it as either white or colored, but no efforts of my memory can conjure up the faintest image of what that color was. I tried blue and gold and violet and red, but none of them will fit. How it is possible to have a visual experience which immediately and ever after becomes impossible to remember, I do not attempt to explain. The other was its angle. It was not at right angles to the floor, but as soon as I've said this, I hasten to add that this was of putting it as a latter reconstruction. What one actually felt at the moment was that the column of light was vertical, but the floor was not horizontal. The whole room seemed to have heeled over as if it were on board a ship. The impression, however produced, was that this creature had reference to some horizontal, to some whole system of directions based outside the earth, and that its mere presence imposed that alien system on me and abolished the terrestrial horizontal. I had no doubt at all that I was seeing an Eldil, and little doubt that I was seeing the Archon of Mars, the Ursa of Malacandra. And now that the thing had happened, I was no longer in a condition of abject panic. My sensations were, it is true, in some ways very unpleasant. The fact that it was quite obviously not organic, the knowledge that intelligence was somehow located in this homogeneous cylinder of light, but not related to it, as our consciousness is related to our brains and nerves, was profoundly disturbing. It would not fit into our categories. The response which we ordinarily make to a living creature and that which we make to an inanimate object were both equally inappropriate. On the other hand, all those doubts which I had felt before I entered the cottage as to whether these creatures were friend or foe, and whether Ransom were a prisoner or a dupe, had for the moment vanished. My fear was now of another kind. I felt sure that the creature was what we call good, but I wasn't sure whether I liked goodness as much as I had supposed. This is a very terrible experience. As long as what you're afraid of is something evil, you may still hope that the good may come to your rescue. But suppose you struggle through to the good and find that it is also dreadful. How if food turns out to be the very thing you can't eat, and home the very place you can't live, and your very comforter the person who makes you uncomfortable? Then indeed there is no rescue possible. The last card has been played. For a second or two, I was nearly in that condition. Here at last was a bit of that world from beyond the world, which I had always supposed that I loved and desired, breaking through and appearing to my senses, and I didn't like it. I wanted it to go away. I wanted every possible distance, gulf, curtain, blanket, and barrier to be placed between it and me. But I did not fall quite into the gulf. Oddly enough, my very sense of helplessness saved me and steadied me. For now, I was quite obviously drawn in. The struggle was over. The next decision did not lie with me. Then, like a noise from a different world, came the opening of the door and the sound of boots on the doormat, and I saw silhouetted against the grayness of the night in the open doorway a figure which I recognized as Ransom. The speaking, which was not a voice, came out again of the rod of light, and Ransom, instead of moving, stood still and answered it. Both speeches were in a strange polysyllabic language, which I had not heard before. I make no attempt to excuse the feelings which awoke in me when I heard the unhuman sound addressing my friend, and my friend answering it in the unhuman language. They are, in fact, inexcusable. But if you think they are improbable at such a juncture, I must tell you plainly that you have read neither history nor your own heart to much effect. They were feelings of resentment, horror, and jealousy. It was in my mind to shout out, "Leave your familiar alone, you damned magician, and attend to me." What I actually said was, "Oh, Ransom, thank God you've come." So there was chapter 1 of Paralandria. Hey, Nolan, Dust, everyone else who's joined, welcome. Well, I'm glad that Brave New Normal got to meet you tonight, 2 more Vs. Hi, Christina. How are you tonight if you're still around? And 2 more Vs just said, got to get going. Good to see you. Take care. God bless all of you. He loves you and will be there for you. Yeah, thanks for that, man. Hope you sleep well. How have I been? Not great. I'm pretty much fucking too stupid to explain how I've been doing. Last year really broke me down to nothing. There were months there, but I was nothing but like a raw nerve pain. Or another way to describe the experience is the end of 2021 involved just a couple months of constant demonic attack at a level that I've never experienced before. The intensity of the suicidal feelings, and then, oh, it's interesting when you read, if anyone reads all of that trilogy, there's parts where it describes, well, in the next chapter, what gets revealed is that when the narrator was trying to get to Ransom's cottage, all those thoughts that were popping into his head to make him turn around were the evil Eldila putting those thoughts on him. And in the third book, there's a scene where somebody in captivity by the bad guys gets exposed to demonic attack on his thoughts. And it's really very much like, and that's only a couple minutes that he goes through it at a time. It's like I went through that for months. And the long haul COVID effects are not getting any better. Like, I know depression makes me dumber, but the combination of depression and the effects on my brain that long haul COVID have left me incredibly fucking stupid. Very, very broken down. I'm in no way who I was before. I'm glad you enjoyed the stream, Jamil. Have a good night. Thus says, I feel like my Facebook picture, kind of a dim wick lighting up and dimming. I'm sorry that you're not doing great either. I mean, like the intensity of all the suicidal shit is gone. I fluctuate. I have better and worse moments. Too stupid to describe what I was thinking. Okay, Christina's doing all right. Glad that somebody's doing all right here. Made some samosas tonight. First time making them. How did they turn out? Dust says, I still get amnesia, but it's good to see you. It's good to see you. Wow. It's good to know you're here too. Church does help, though. I'm glad church is helping for you. Christina says, I actually had a convo and cooperation with my system. Sorry, I'm not processing what you mean by that. Stop saying too stupid. Your brain's too foggy. You're not stupid. Feels like I'm stupid now. Like, I've had a lot of time to run systems diagnostic or self-examination. I've been doing a lot of the fucking meditative work and like self-examining, and I don't mean it as an insult towards myself. It's just that's the best way to describe. My brain is really broken down. It's really hard to remember things. It's hard to concentrate. I can't even in my best moments think large thoughts. I don't understand things. Fuck, I even have thoughts in my head that I don't understand. And I don't know how to explain it. Martin asks, what if anything has been helping for you? Resting. Like, there's been some shit I've had to deal with that I'm not going to talk about. Times when I've had to push myself, try to pull myself together for a little while to deal with stuff has been really hard on me. The times I've done the most healing is when I had a couple weeks at a time where I had nothing at all to deal with, and I could just completely spend all day doing the things I need to do without in any way needing to interact with other people. And even things like mindfulness and attaching to just that, that power of now type shit, like just connecting to the awareness, even that is all difficult in a way now that I don't know how to explain. But having the time to process, meditate, rest, has been what's helped the most. I've been doing other things like reading to try to get my brain working a bit better, and I've been like pathetically working at trying to exercise. Another thing I found really fucking weird, this goes like right back to when I first had the COVID fatigue. I noticed it immediately. So, how do I explain this? Okay, like in neuroplasticity, that idea that your brain doesn't know the difference between what, like meditation and actually doing something. Like there's the studies that show you can learn to play piano like through meditation rather than touching the keys, and that just meditating, like visually going through exercises, has some beneficial effect. I've used that often in the past during depression, and times when I don't really want to exercise. I used to do that shit all the time, where it's like you just like meditate, you go into the meditative space and you do exercise in there, and it has some benefit for the body. One thing I found really fucking weird was when I had from the moment I had long haul COVID, I remembered last spring and summer thinking like, hey, if I can't get up and move around at all, I should do just the mental exercises I do sometimes. And what I found really fucking weird was I couldn't do that either. Like even in my mind, I could not make myself do a push-up. it was like even the mental body had no energy. I stuck with working on that. And a few months ago, I started managing to be able to push through doing that. And I moved from that to adding actual exercise to it as well. But my body, it's the effect of long haul on my body is similar to that of my brain. I do just a small amount of exercise and I'm sore for 2 days. So I've basically been sore for like the majority of the past almost 2 months all the time, but it's not improving, and it's not as, even when I'm really out of shape, usually you start exercising, you're sore the first couple times for that day or two. That's not going away at all, and it's happening in an extremely, although as I say, not going away at all, it might be just on the verge of changing slightly, but I'm not entirely sure. But just so in every way, I feel completely broken down to just about nothing. I feel kind of wiped clean. And I have no idea if I'm going to recover from this. This is the first time going into winter where I can't think to myself, well, at least I will start feeling better in the spring. Because long haul fucks up my spring and summer state as well. And the wear of my brain, well, I guess this is my first winter going through long haul. So maybe it's just this is what long haul feels like in the winter. I am just wearing down more and more. It's like the long haul effects are getting worse, especially the mental ones. All right, but to counter all that fucking depressing bullshit, Christina's samosas turned out pretty great, actually. So there's good in the world as well. Christina says, I cheated Costco, had a butter chicken sauce, which I bought months ago and finally remembered that I had, so I decided to use it. Used it with Carbolance tortillas, so they're keto-ish. Samosas. Oh, good. I'm glad they turned out well. System equals DID, AK my many part. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, there's times I refer to myself as a system as well. Yeah, and if I wasn't so stupid at the moment, I think I would have read it the way you meant it. Wait, so now what was the comment? Okay, I actually had good convo and cooperation within your different parts. All right, that's good. I'm glad things are going well for somebody. Dust says, I have enough trouble remembering who I am to identify other personalities. And then I do miss the presence of active community in the sorting group. Yeah, I'm sorry that shit fell apart. And really, the problem is that my life fell apart. Yeah, 2021 just really fucking knocked me out of the game. I had been wondering if there's any future to me doing this. If I can't recover or pull my own shit together better, I don't see how I'm ever going to be able to get that community interaction and get shit going again or not. But on the other hand, I don't know. So that's why I forced myself to show up for this. I'm going to ride it out for a while longer. I don't know if I can do much more. than showing up just on the full moons for now. And sorry to everyone I haven't gotten back to. I only got back to very, very few people, and have spoken to very, very few people. I just have not been able to handle anything. Like, I do actually care about all of it. I hope I'm not coming across too fucking negative. I really do care about everyone here. And I know a lot of people are struggling, and I wish I could help. This current version of me does not really understand how the fuck the former versions of me that operated were helping people. But somehow they were. But it really, yeah, there's certain things that seem out of my hands and out of like the realm of sorting yourself out. Um, there's certain things like this long haul COVID that I just don't know what the way to deal with is. And there's a couple outside circumstances where it's not a matter of what I do, it's what um, other people do or what the system does. Like, more so than in a long time. I have no idea if I'm going to be able to pull my shit together and make improvements in my life, or if things are just going to continue to steadily get worse. And since I don't know, I'm not going to give up my connection to this. Because if I step back too much, even if I call it a break and say I'm going to quit doing these monthly things, there's very little chance I will come back. But I don't know if I can pull my shit together enough to get back to doing more live streams, or if my brain doesn't recover, I don't see myself doing fucking interviews with experts or those kinds of podcasts anymore. And I don't know if or when I am going to feel up to doing like private sessions and group events again. Martin says, do you think it's related to the vax or the Rona itself? If it's not going away, you might want to look into some treatment for it. I've heard of these long haul rehabilitation projects that include both V4X. Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely like long haul COVID, not the vaccine. Because I got long haul COVID, I got vaccinated afterwards. Um, I don't know if I did because I'd heard for some people that helps the long haul COVID, but I had the long haul COVID had lasted a couple months before I got vaccinated, and then the vaccine might have helped slightly because there's some parts of it that aren't as bad as what they were in the spring. Like, the fatigue's still bad, but it's slightly less. There might have been some improvement from the vaccine, but I can't tell because I got that at the same time that I had that brief relationship that improved things quite a bit. So the vaccine either helped or did nothing in relieving it. But it's definitely COVID itself that fucked me up. And my problem at the moment is I don't have the mental energy or the fucking hope or anything or the physical energy to research what to do about long haul. And there's like the last time I was able to check, there's nothing about the interplay of long haul and bipolar disorder. But yeah, I just don't have. I don't have it in me to do any research and to try to figure it out. My brain is worn the fuck out. I don't know if I have any more talking in me at all. But I did read Dust just posted a link to the Discord. And so if anyone else is missing like the interaction of the Sorting Myself Out community and wants to gather over on the Discord now, I think that's the purpose of him putting it there. Yeah, no, my brain's worn out from doing this. I'm going to wrap this up now. I don't know. If I surprisingly start feeling better soon, maybe I will start trying to do more. But the way things are going, I imagine it will be the next full moon before anyone sees me again. And sorry about that. I really do wish I could do more. Now, on that note, God bless. Lunatic love to all.